Welcome to Thursday Devotion. We're excited to have you join us today. And we're here with Mark and, of course, Zillian and I here together again to talk with you some more about fasting as we are well into the Lent season now.
Yeah.
So, Mark, will you give us a summary?
Yeah, a little review. What happened on Tuesday?
What happened on
That was
Tuesday?
so long ago as we're all in the same clothes as we were in on Tuesday.
I can barely remember.
Yeah.
So Tuesday, we talked about fasting and kind of why, where it came from. So why is basically to focus on your relationship with God, to shift the priorities in your mind, spirit, and body to being all about Him rather than other things going on in our lives. It comes from biblical practices from our heroes in the Old Testament and New Testament. You see Moses, Elijah, Jesus, Paul and Barnabas, a lot of different people doing that. Another kind of fasting is to break sin habits, and you see Samuel calling the Israelites to that, Joel, the prophet, calling the Israelites to that. And so that's a way of recognizing the grief in your sin that it has brought you, and just kind of embodying the reset that you are taking by fasting into like a new life, a new way forward. But yeah, that's kind of what we talked about on Tuesday, a variety of other things.
And you're going to help us out with some tips.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about
practicalities.
Yeah.
What can we do? And maybe we're going to have some reflection time for you guys to reflect on what you can do, particularly. So, that's kind of the idea.
All right, well, why don't you start us out? What would be the very first tip you'd give us? Mark, you've been practicing this for many, many years, right?
I've been practicing it for a bit. But I think the first tip I would give is to remember why you're doing it. Because Jesus called out a whole lot of people in Matthew 6 by saying, when you fast, anoint your head with oil, and do not be like the Pharisees who disfigure their faces, because the Pharisees were going after the glory of their peers by showing that they were fasting so much. So the reason we fast is to focus on our relationship with God. So remember why you're fasting, and that kind of bleeds into the next tip that do it in secret, because you're not doing it for anyone else to see it. You are focusing on your relationship with God. And so do it in secret. Oh, what was that?
Is that it?
That was very strange. Don't know what that was.
I don't know what that was either.
That's not your
Very
phone?
strange beeping noises happening around here. We'll just
Nice.
go with it.
So that kind of tip also bleeds into another tip, which is don't exclude yourself from everything else you're doing in your life while you're fasting. Dallas Willard says in his book, Spirit of the Disciplines, that you should continue on, especially with prayer. Prayer and fasting are very much hand in hand. But also still being involved in service in your community. Because if you are idolizing fasting and just rejecting everything else, then you're taking yourself out of the community, which sometimes solitude is a good thing. That's a different spiritual practice. But fasting should not take you completely away from everything.
Or at least it really doesn't have to, and should lead to service and love of neighbor, not to kind of self-absorption with how hungry you are. Or spending all your time kind of focused on not eating. I loved what you said about how our hunger should point us to our hunger for God. That fasting is kind of a time set aside really to spend the time with God. And we were talking as kind of in between here about how easy it is to forget to eat. I forget to eat all the time. You guys mentioned
I get anxious and food's not important all of a sudden.
Okay, and so that's not fasting.
No.
I wouldn't consider that fasting.
No, not
I
at
don't know
all.
about you guys. Okay.
Yeah, it's just a negligence of eating because of my emotional state. It's nothing to do with me actually saying, God, you are so good and my soul hungers for you so deeply that I am going to choose to abstain from eating. But I think it can often turn into that sort of thing. I know even on a practical sense, for me, in my first and second year, I realized, because I never have breakfast, so I eat at dinner, and then I don't eat again till noon after chapel the next day. So I was like not eating for like 17 hours of like every single 24-hour period, and I didn't even realize it. And
that is not healthy, Zillion.
Anyways, we'll talk about my physical health later. I'm doing fine. but turning that, then I realized, I was like, wow, like this is actually like quite a hunk of fasting that my entire life, in a sense, at that point was consumed by. And so I was like, why don't I make that an intentional thing? So when I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I'm a little hungry, but I'm too tired to wake up before my 8 a.m., so I'm just not going to eat. And then actually, instead of just being like, well, it's too bad I'm hungry, to stop and be like, okay, God, like, it's interesting how my body is hungry now, but how much more does my soul hunger for you, you know? And stopping like walking between classes when that was still a thing, and having that feeling of being like, man, I wish I packed a snack this morning because I'm hungry. And instead of just leaving it at that thought, then being like, God, like show me, like fill my soul, like speak to me now, show me something, give me something to chew on the inside. Because a man shall not live on bread alone, and just actually chewing on his word, like being filled by his word. And so I think in a lot of ways we could turn hunger even just into a spiritual practice of saying, well, my body is hungry, but my soul longs for you so much more than my hunger for my body could ever distract me from you.
Yeah, a fast from food is almost like a feast on the spirit.
Yeah. So ooh, I like that. A hunger, like the fast of the body leads to a feast of the spirit.
Yeah. Yeah, so intentionality is a huge tip, because that's really good for taking it seriously. Something that was good in my experience was taking the time that I would be eating meals and spending that time alone with God.
Yes.
So then, like the rest of the day, I was going about my day, still within the community, still doing my part, but I was also taking that time that would have been for food, dedicated to food, and probably with others, but taking my time away from that and spending it with God. So yeah, that's a very good tip to remember.
Yeah, I think that's huge, because me then, in the times that I was fasting, last Lent I did like it was either Saturday or Sunday, I wouldn't eat for 24 hours, and could easily find myself then just filling my time with distractions instead, you know? If it's just homework, I'm like, I'm hungry, I don't really have energy to do anything physical right now, but hey, I'm just gonna sit and do something, or I'm gonna go and socialize, go be with people or something like that. And it took away from the spiritual aspect of having it be something in my heart, something just between me and God, where I was going to seek out His presence and Him alone, not just distraction from my hunger.
So, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, so then he's also fasting off the social feedback, like the social encouragement and everything that could also be feeding you. Like there are so many different things that feed us. Right? Our social media, our instant communications with people, our hanging out with people, and all these things are good things. Like being with people is really good. We're created for community. We are created for food. We're created for all these good things.
But we idolize friendships a lot, I think, at Trinity. It's very, very obvious how in coming to a Christian university, we all get so excited about becoming friends with like-minded people coming from places that were not big Christian establishments a lot of the time. But then all of a sudden, when we miss out with hanging out with our friends, or we miss out on that social fill and distraction, then we feel there's something that's empty in us, you know, that we don't give God the chance to fill, because we don't think it's ever a good opportunity to maybe abstain from those things. Like I love you saying like, well, I'd love to go eat with my dorm because that's what we always do, but to skip that every now and then, to just be like, hey, I love this, but I'm not going to let it become an idol. Like God, I'm still going to choose you over this.
That's good.
God
that's
more.
good.
Yeah.
That kind of leads me to another point where, there's more than just fasting from food. There's also like fasting from idolizing your community, or idolizing your friendship or your friend group, or idolizing technology, social media, a variety of things. So specific to people who struggle with eating disorders or a variety of things, perhaps fasting from food isn't the best idea for you for completely good reasons. So fasting from social media is very helpful to reshift your priority on God, because a lot of times we spend our nights cruising through social media instead of reading our Bible to finish off the day, which would be really good.
Which would be really good. That's a word.
Amen. But also you, for a lot of people, fasting from food can be quite a jump into fasting.
Yes.
So I think it's a good idea to mention that starting slow, there's no shame in starting slow.
Yeah,
like
that's
you
good.
do need to get into this process. So obviously, like, you don't have to go fast for 40 days right now.
It was on my agenda.
Unless the Lord's calling you to it.
Unless the Lord's calling you to it.
But only if, like, you receive other feedback on that, confirming that calling. But starting with a day, maybe.
Including your pulse, maybe.
Your doctor. Make sure you're checking in with somebody.
But starting with a day, maybe, or starting with something other than food is absolutely great and totally reasonable. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
I really like that emphasis on starting slow. That I think it's also fun to just dive into a practice sometimes and like give it your all and try it out. And kind of like extreme sports. You can do extreme practices and go for it. But I think also that fasting could be something that has really caught me about how the church, how you told us how the church practiced it 2 days a week. And I've started to think, since you said that, I wonder if there's something that I could fast 2 days a week. What would it be? Something, not food, because I need regular blood sugars, but I'm sure there are many things that I rely on, that I could fast from. And I wonder, what is it that you could fast from?
It's a good question.
So do we want to take it?
Let's take like 30 seconds.
Good question.
All right, let's take 30 seconds. And what could you fast from? We encourage you to take a minute, either now or later, and maybe write down some of the ways you could fast. Where do you hunger and thirst? What do you long for? What are the needs that fill you that you could set aside for 1 hour, for 1 day, for however long, for the season of Lent, in order to hunger and thirst more intensely and more focused on God? So take some time to journal about that, or write it out.
Tell a friend.
Yeah.
Get someone to keep you accountable to it.
That's kind of fun to fast with a bunch of friends. Like, a whole bunch of my friends, we used to do that when I was at Rivendell. The people who hosted Rivendell, we'd have a meeting and we would it wasn't a meeting, it was like a hangout and talk about Lent. And one of the things we would do is everybody around the circle would talk about what they were fasting for Lent. So I remember Joyce, one of the women, she fasted by playing the piano every day because she loved to play the piano and it felt like an indulgence, but it was worship. So what she did is she fasted off an hour of something else that she would have filled her time with in order to spend an hour playing the piano and playing worship music.
Glorifying God.
That's
glorifying
good.
God.
I like that.
And it was really neat. We got such creative ideas. We went around the circle and all sorts of people had these things I never would have thought of. So it's really fun to fast in a community and to share that with your friends. And then you spur one another on, and I can't play piano, but I'm sure there's something else that I could worship God with and give up an hour of something, right? Fast off an hour to worship God.
That's cool.
So, I mean, what do your friends think about? What do they want to fast from? And how can you be inspired by their ideas? It's kind of a fun topic of conversation.
That it is. Yeah. And I mean, for those of you who might not know what Lent is, search it up. It starts February 17th. And Lent is basically just actually, Jen, why don't you talk about it instead of me trying to say what I know?
Lent is the 40 days. Oh, no, I'm not a scholar. Go to your biblical studies profs for that, please. Shout out to them. They are amazing. Lent is the 40 days that happen before Easter. They begin with Ash Wednesday and they culminate with Good Friday and then Holy Saturday. And then we celebrate on Easter. And that 40 days has typically been devoted to repentance and to reflecting on how we are in such need of Christ and to dwelling on his sufferings. And a really great customary practice in Lent that you could join with your fasting is to read the end of one of the Gospels about the journey of Christ to the cross. And that's kind of the journey of Lent. We journey with Christ through his last days to the cross. Awesome. So that's Lent. And that's why we fast, because then we remember how Christ suffered and what he gave up for us.
Yeah.
And then we give up something in response to Christ for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope you guys take up the challenge to hear from God, some place to fast. Like I said, it is a very flexible spiritual practice in many ways. So just start somewhere. It doesn't have to be a big scary thing. Just let it be something.
Yeah. Mark, thanks so much for introducing us to this practice.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, Mark is kind of an expert on this.
And available and would love to talk to
That's right, which is why we have him here.
Yeah.
So feel free to knock on his door or not.
Definitely.
And track him down.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Blessings of peace as you enter into this season of fasting, whatever that looks like for you.
And over reading break, please use some time when there's no school or academics or homework or anything. Use that time to actually try out some of these different fasting techniques because practically it's a lot easier to do. And so I think that's an awesome place to start.
Yeah.
Blessings.
Go in peace.
Thank you.